Well, what a great day. And we're not finished. I want to read to you very quickly out of the Gospel of Matthew. This takes place on the afternoon of the crucifixion. Late in the afternoon, a wealthy man from Arimathea, a disciple of Jesus, arrived. His name was Joseph. He went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate granted his request. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in clean linens, put it in his own tomb, a new tomb only recently cut into the rock, and rolled a large stone across the entrance. Then he went off. By the way, what Matthew doesn't tell you, he had some help with all of this. There's a lot of stuff going on here. But Mary Magdalene and the other Mary stayed, sitting in plain view of the tomb. After sundown, the high priests and the Pharisees arranged a meeting with Pilate. They said, "Sir, we just remembered that liar announced while he was still alive, after 3 days, I will be raised. We've got to get that tomb sealed unto the third day. There's a good chance his disciples will come and steal the corpse and then go around saying he's risen from the dead. Then we'll be worse off than before, the final deceit surpassing the first." Pilate told them, "You will have a guard. Go ahead and secure it the best you can." So they went out and secured the tomb, sealing the stone and posting guards. After the Sabbath, as the first light of the new week dawned, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to keep vigil at the tomb. Suddenly the earth reeled and rocked under their feet as God's angel came down from heaven, came right up to where they were standing. He rolled back the stone and then sat on it. Don't you love that? Don't you love that? Shafts of lightning blazed from him. His garments shimmered snow white. The guards at the tomb were scared to death. They were so frightened they couldn't move. The angel spoke to the women, "There is nothing to fear here." Wow. And there's nothing to fear here. I know you're looking for Jesus, the one they nailed to the cross. He's not here. He was raised, just as he said. Come and look at the place where he was placed. Now, get on your way quickly and tell his disciples he's risen from the dead. He is going on ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. That's the message. That is the message. You know, we describe the resurrection as being a marvel. Because it really is. It's awesome. It's amazing. It's incredible. It's just something else. And there's some very good reasons why we say that about the resurrection. I just want to give you 2 or 3 today. Why is it such a marvel? Well, first of all, because of that body. That body had been so beaten, so whipped, so abused, so destroyed, that it was now lifeless, breathless, absolutely worthless. It was done for. There was no recovering, no resuscitating, no reviving by any human means whatsoever. In fact, don't tell Joseph I said this, but when he looked at that body, he must have thought, there is no way that this is ever coming back. Even in light of what Jesus has said. And you say, "Pastor Buddy, how do you know that?" Because when he prepared that body for burial, he prepared it for permanent burial. They put over 100 pounds of spices on that body when they buried it. Joseph was not considering a little temporary 3-day short stay. He was looking at this as permanent, because that's what humans do. They look at impossibilities as permanent. They look at that kind of destruction as permanent. But enter the power of God. Enter resurrection power. And that body came back again. And God, in all of his awesomeness, took what was too far gone and he caused it to come back. He brought it back. And he didn't just bring it back. He brought it back to where it was unrecognizable. Anybody that would have ever been through something like that, how could they be unrecognizable to the people who had just seen them? Only God can do that. Only God can take a life and cause it to be unrecognizable to what it used to be through His power. And it was not just unrecognizable. So amazingly, there were no side effects, no ill effects, no residual effects, no lasting effects to everything that that body had gone through. No effects whatsoever. That is resurrection power. And as Jesus saw His body raised, as God did that to that body, to that broken body, so does He do it to broken hearts and broken minds and broken souls and broken marriages and broken relationships and broken families and broken minds. He does it. The power that was there is here. And we know it because of that body. Secondly, it's a marvel because of those grave clothes. Oh yes. When Jesus was given life again, it wasn't going to do Him any good if He couldn't get out of what was on Him. What other people had wrapped around Him. You know, people do this all the time. They put stuff on us. They wrap us up, and this body was so bound up and wound up and tied up by what somebody else had put on it. And just like people who are wound up and bound up with guilt and shame and fear and hurt and all the things that get on us, so was this body. Regardless of how much life was in this body, if something wasn't done about those grave clothes, it wouldn't have mattered, because He couldn't breathe normally, He couldn't function, He couldn't move normally unless something were to happen to the grave clothes. Along come God. Here He comes. What does He do? He unwraps that which He has just now made alive. He took all of that off. Now, we would have thought that He would have had incinerated all of those soiled, putrid, stained garments and rags and wrappings that were tied up like a mummy. We would have thought God would have burned it up and incinerated it with the power of His resurrection. But He chose not to do so. Why? Because He wanted them to remain as a witness. So that Jesus could say, that's where I was, that's what I was wrapped up in, but not anymore. He has set me free. I don't live that way anymore. I'm not wrapped up in all of that anymore. We would have loved to see them burned up. God says, no, I'm going to leave them there. In fact, He did even more than that. He took some of those grave clothes and supernaturally folded them. I appreciate that, being a neatnik. I think that that's a little OCD of the Lord, but He did it. I identify. He didn't just throw them in the corner. He folded them. Why? Oh, because He wanted you and I to know that not only can He get us out of all of that stuff, He can arrange it and order it and fold it in such a way that it all makes sense. Those grave clothes, they're a marvel of resurrection. He takes all of the stinky stuff and He makes it make sense. His power. Not by our logic. Not by our reasonings. Not by our cover-ups. He makes it make sense. So that we don't have to run from it anymore. We don't have to hide from it anymore. That body, that was a marvel. That thing was lifeless, hopeless, helpless, but the power of God brought it back. Those grave clothes don't want to know. God said, oh, I can untie you and unwrap you. You see, one of the great lies of the enemy is you'll never really be free. You're never really going to ever get out of that. It's going to hang on you and hold you forever. And God said, I've left these grave clothes here just so you'll know that that is a lie. That body, those grave clothes. What about that stone? That's a tough one. That stone. Because here's Jesus, now made alive, totally unwrapped, ready to go, but with no place to go because he can't get out. He's got a stone rolled in front, and he can't get out. And there's no way to move it from the inside. And on top of that, there's soldiers that are guarding it, and it's been sealed by the authority of the Roman government. Nobody's breaking that seal. Even the women were wondering, how are we ever going to shift that stone? It is too big. It reminds me of us. Because of a lot of us, at one time in our life, may have had one thing that was keeping us from getting into our destiny. One thing that keeps us out of relationship with Jesus. One thing that is hindering us. One thing that's stopping us from encountering the fullness of who God is. That one thing. And it looks impossible. It looks immovable. So what did Jesus do? I'll tell you what he did. He walked right through it. You didn't have to open it. He passed all the way through that stone onto the other side, and he was still in one piece. He wasn't fragmented or fractured at all. That thick, solid, impervious thing standing in front of him, by the power of resurrection, he simply passed right through it, and it became, are you ready for this? A non-issue. How would you like for the most impossible thing in your life today to become a non-issue? Well, I will tell you that the resurrection makes it a non-issue, because God says, what I have done in him, I will do in you, and you can pass all the way through it and get on to the other side. In fact, Jesus made a habit of that after the resurrection. You just never know what he was going to do. He would walk through solid stone walls. He would walk through securely locked doors. You couldn't keep him out of the purposes of God. And I'd say that's resurrection power. That's what resurrection does for us. So if I'm looking at something and saying, that is the one thing that is hindering me today, I want to tell you something. Resurrection has already dealt with it. It's time for you and I to pass through it, get on the other side of it, turn around and declare, wow, that was a big non-issue. Here is what Paul said. By his power, God raised the Lord from the dead. and He will raise us also. In other words, whatever He did there, He does here. Whatever He did then, He does now. You know, the greatest picture of resurrection is really standing right here. This is it. Baptism is the greatest personal demonstration of resurrection. Listen to what Paul said in Colossians. For we have been buried with Him into His death. And our baptism into death, quote unquote, also means we were raised with Him when we believed in God's resurrection power, the power that raised Him from death's realm. Here's the rest of it. This realm of death describes our former state, for we were held in sin's grasp. But now, not then, but now, we've been resurrected out of that realm of death, never to return. Let me repeat that. Never to return, for we are forever alive and forgiven of all our sins. Wow. The reason we call baptism such a great demonstration is because it's a burial. It really is. It's a burial into a watery grave where everything that was, everything that the enemy said about me, everything I thought about me, everything I did, everything I was, all the old, the former, all the sinfulness is buried here. Done for. Finished. But it's more than just a burial. It's a breakthrough, because you're going to notice, and if you get close enough, you might even feel the breakthrough. When they come up out of the water, they are literally dividing the waters and coming out of what they were in, never to return, never to go back, never to be reminded of again. This is God saying, you're out once and for all. We don't leave them under the water for very long. We bring them up because this is not a death unto nothing. This is a death unto life. This is a coming back. This is a bringing back, and it's also a beginning, because when they come up and out, they are stepping into their destiny in Jesus Christ. This is the farthest thing from a religious ritual you could find. This is a demonstration of resurrection. It is the power of God manifest to us. And we have a couple of people who are going to get wet today.